Assalamu alaikum. Hello everyone. Today I will be starting the fourth learning outcome under the topic of Unit 3.1, which is diffusion and osmosis. So let's start. I have highlighted the learning outcome that I will cover today, which is investigating the factors that influence diffusion, limited to the surface area, temperature, concentration gradient and distance. Before I start with studying all these factors, I would like to give you some examples which are commonly asked in exams as far as diffusion is concerned. In front of you, you can see two examples. One is that of any random cell from the body of a living organism in which tissue respiration is taking place, and it can show you that for the tissues to respire, oxygen needs to enter into the cell and carbon dioxide, which is a waste product, needs to move out of the cells. So both these gases can move in or move out because of their concentration gradients. As you can see, the red colored molecules in the picture are all oxygen molecules and the blue colored molecules are carbon dioxide. There is a gradient of oxygen from outside to inside, meaning that there are more oxygen molecules outside the cell as compared to inside. So hence, by the law of diffusion, oxygen will enter down its concentration gradient into the cell and carbon dioxide will move down its concentration gradient out of the cell. Another common example which is used in case of diffusion is that of an amoeba, which is a tiny unicellular organism living in water ponds. Amoeba also has a very simple way of living in which it gets oxygen from the pond in the outside environment in which it lives, and that's why the oxygen moves from outside to inside, whereas carbon dioxide, which is formed as a result of excretory processes, will move from inside to outside. So had it not been this simple process of diffusion, living organisms ranging from the simplest to the most complex would not have been capable of life or living. Then diffusion in plants, the most common example quoted from plants is that of inwards and outward movements of three gaseous substances, namely carbon dioxide, oxygen and water. For plants to photosynthesize or to make food, the carbon dioxide needs to get inside the leaf. So you can see that the carbon dioxide is going in, which is of course very understandable that there has to be lots of carbon dioxide in the outside air and less carbon dioxide inside the air spaces of the leaf, which is why the carbon dioxide moves down its concentration gradient from outside to the inner surface of the leaf. Similarly, oxygen is a waste product formed as a result of photosynthesis. So oxygen leaves the cell down its concentration gradient. Together with that, a lot of water is also made inside the plants. So that water in the gaseous or in the vapor forms comes out of the holes inside the leaves, which are known as stomata, which we find lots of these on the undersurface of the leaf. So water vapor will come out in the process of transpiration through these tiny holes which are found in the undersurface of the leaf. At the bottom, you can see the equation for photosynthesis, which shows that to photosynthesize or to make food, the plant needs to combine carbon dioxide and water so as to make glucose and oxygen. So this shows that the plant cannot get carbon dioxide unless the carbon dioxide goes in through diffusion and the oxygen moves out of the leaf through the stomata through diffusion. And in all this process, water is also formed, so water vapor also comes out. Then some examples from the human body. Right in front of you, you can see that on the left hand side, the diagram of an intestine with lots of blood vessels. So in our food, we take vitamin C rich substances, right? But that vitamin C cannot be of any use unless and until it is absorbed into the blood, right? So this means that this vitamin C must be present in the intestine because we've got it through our food substances, and then from this intestine the vitamin C gets absorbed into these blood vessels by means of diffusion. So diffusion is a process which is vital to the life of all living organisms for many of the life processes that are happening inside our body. Similarly, we have urea and glucose. As you know that this diagram is that of the kidney, The job of the kidney is to rid our body of toxic waste substances. So toxic substances like urea, which are found in our blood, they enter the kidney through the renal artery, and from the renal artery these toxic substances will be passing into the various parts of the kidney, so that finally urea can be gotten rid of in the form of urine from our body. So it is only through the process of diffusion that urea can leave the blood and enter into the kidney and then finally become a part of the urine. Not only urea, but glucose can also diffuse from the blood, which means from these blood vessels, into these tube-like structures or tubules of the kidney. So this means diffusion is very crucial for the absorption of food substances from our intestines or from our digestive system into our blood, and also it is important for the absorption of certain waste substances from our blood so that we can expel them from our body. In front of you, you can see the various factors that affect the rate of diffusion. So, of course, the greater the concentration difference, or the steeper this gradient of substances across any membrane or across any across in between any two compartments, right, the higher would be the rate of diffusion, which means that the greater the difference between the number of molecules across a partially permeable membrane, the higher would be the rate of diffusion. Then of course the size of molecules. The smaller the size of molecules, the higher would be the rate of diffusion. Temperature also increases the diffusion rate, because diffusion is nothing but the random movement of molecules, ions and atoms. So these random movement of molecules will be increased if the temperature of the medium is increased, because temperature will provide heat energy, and heat energy will increase the kinetic energy, which will increase the random collision of these molecules. So their chance of diffusing from one area to another will be higher. Diffusion is the maximum in gases, because in gases the particles are far apart and they can move randomly, freely at a higher speed as compared to liquids, and of course the diffusion rate will be the least in the solids. The surface area, the larger the surface area, the higher the diffusion rate. For example, for surface area, I'll show you this diagram of a leaf. The surface area of a leaf is very large, it is spread. So because of its large surface area, we expect larger number of stomata to be present, and hence the rate of the diffusion will also be increased. This can be easily compared to the example of a big sugar crystal and a small sugar crystal. If I ask you to dissolve a big sugar crystal in a glass of water by means of a stirrer, it will take some time for this big crystal to dissolve. Whereas on the other hand, if I give you very tiny sugar crystals, they will dissolve very quickly. So the main difference is because of the surface area. The surface area to volume ratio of the tiny crystals is much more as compared to the surface area to volume ratio of the big crystal. So that is why the smaller crystals will dissolve quickly as compared to the large crystals. Let's look at some other factors if we have left any. Yes, I think the surface area was left. So we are done with studying all the different factors that affect the rate of the diffusion, right? And also one factor which is coming in my mind is the distance of diffusion. For example, I would like to give you the example of how diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide takes place inside our lungs. Now inside our lungs, I'll show you a picture. Yes, this picture shows that we have our lung tubes, and the smallest of the lung tubes are these grape-like structures known as the air sacs, and every air sac is surrounded by the very thin blood capillaries. Now since these blood capillaries and the surface of these air sacs is extremely thin, so the diffusion of gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide, can occur across these very thin membranes very easily. So this shows that the lesser the diffusion distance, the greater would be the rate of diffusion. So with that, we have covered our learning outcome of factors affecting the rate of diffusion. See you next time inshallah in the upcoming lesson. So till then, Allah Hafiz.